This session, this first fireside chat, is about what I call, it's about resilience and it's about rebuilding. And in digital health and across what's going on in the industry of things like Facebook, and they'll talk a lot about this in the next session, we are really honored to have Nandini Ramani. It's Ramani, right? I kept calling you Ramini. I'm so sorry. Ramani from Outcome Health on stage with Josh Campbell, the CEO of Techonomy, to talk about a really exciting comeback, I hope. So why don't we welcome them to the stage?
Great, thank you, Jill. Thanks for having us. Everyone, thank you for waking up early this morning, as Jill mentioned. And Nandini, I'll try to give an overview of what Outcome Health is. You'll tell me how I do. But for those of you who aren't familiar with Outcome Health, they operate about 150,000 digital screens inside of physicians and providers, exam rooms, waiting rooms, with curated content, both editorial as well as advertising. Good?
Yeah.
Pretty good? So
140 character description about what we do.
Yeah. Well, so you came from Twitter,
yes.
Right? So 2017, you decide to leave sort of a Silicon Valley darling to join a Chicago-based digital health company. Why? What was exciting about the opportunity?
So first of all, I want to say I love Twitter. We have this saying that once you're a tweep, you're always a tweep for lifetime, and it's true. It's a wonderful company, and the reason I left mostly is because I consider myself a work in progress and curiosity, like trying to understand where I'm a technologist and where you can disrupt. And I looked at several verticals and ended up with healthcare. Health and wellness is a space which, on the one hand, you have like all these advances in orthopedics and lots going on, and yet at the point of care in the doctor's office, I still sign in on a clipboard, even in Silicon Valley, which is considered the cutting edge. And so I cannot think of a better way to serve the community than be part of that. Maybe solving world hunger would be a better opportunity. But I look back at anything that's life-changing. All of us have been there, right? When you have news that you're either pregnant or you give birth to a child, those are happy moments and everybody shares with you. But then there's also times when you're sitting alone and scared of test results, and you could be diagnosed with something that's life-changing and life-threatening, and it not only impacts you, but also everyone around you. And in those moments, yes, you can turn to the web, but there's nowhere you get curated content. And you get to spend like 5 minutes with your doctor at best. And so that's the reason I joined. And the second part of it is, the technology. I have a hardware software background and we do both. And so
this idea of purpose, right? You want to do something that's great for the world. And so you joined in 2017. 7 weeks later, after joining, article comes out, management teams accused of fraudulently inflating viewership and advertising, and the company is in real crisis. So you're less than 2 months in, you've made this big shift. It must have been a huge moment to reflect on, is this really what you wanted to do? People probably left at the time. Why did you stay?
Resilience mostly, but also I love a good challenge. And the fundamental of it, though, is all the reasons that I joined the company, independent of what went down or did not, and the allegations, et cetera, the foundation of it is still valid. The mission, the purpose, all of those are still as valuable. And more importantly, the point of care industry is ripe for disruption. And when you run the programs right, I'm a data person, and the numbers just show you that it just works. So I looked at the numbers, I went into it deep. And yes, do we need new standards? Do we need data integrity and rigor and things like that? Absolutely, but I've done that before in my other roles, so I figured I'm gonna double down and do this, and so that's the reason I stayed. And also, candidly, I left the Silicon Valley, I went to Chicago, New York, and Tampa, which is where our teams are based, And the people were so welcoming. They all joined for the same reasons that I did. And to some extent, in 2 months, I felt like I owe it to them, all the people who are rallying behind what point of care is trying to solve.
Great. So, at this point, obviously companies under the microscope really being looked at comes out at the point you guys had raised over $500 million, right? So over $500 million for the company. That comes with a lot of responsibility, not only to the mission and core, but to the investors, right? To shareholders. Does some of that pressure ultimately result in some of the challenges that companies are dealing with?
Well, I mean, if you look at the news these days, yes, that is true. I think it's easy to lose sight of the purpose and mission and the people you're actually there to serve. But I think in the case of not just outcome health, but point of care in general, we have a revenue stream on the one hand that we run. So our content is, we have a trifecta of content. One is educational content, just for health and wellness. Like we're in cardiologists' offices, we're in rheumatologists and oncology. One of the things we also do is we have infusion room tablets where people are sitting for several hours of therapy, right? So we provide content that's educational and helps them live a better lifestyle, like meditation and intake of salt, et cetera, all the good stuff. Then we have customized content from providers, like what doctors want to message to their cohorts that are visiting their offices. And then we have advertising, which is how we monetize the platform. So in our case, the advertising content actually is, let's say you have diabetes or whatever, and you have to take some medication, the more adherence you have to the medication, the better you get. So our flywheel, actually, our monetization helps the patients get better, which is the mission of the company. We want to have better outcomes for the patients. That's one aspect of it, that we have a easy way of saying when you take the medication, follow the guidelines of our content on education, you will get better. And we do the same for doctors as well. That's on the one hand. The other thing, to your point about when I came into the company and the article hit, et cetera, we have a lot of rigor internally in our organizational, the lines of tension between sales and ops, and that's part of what gets carried away. If you let the revenue side of the house dictate everything, then you end up where you lose sight of the mission, and so.
And you say there's tension between sales and ops. In traditional media, we're a small media company, there's also tension between editorial and sales.
Oh yes, sure.
So is that something that you guys deal with on thinking about, ultimately, if you're trying to serve the patient with editorial content and the right content, that sometimes it's at odds on the advertising side?
We ensure it's not just on our own, but also the providers do. If you think about it, they do not want us. It's not like other digital properties where you can just amp up your ads and report quarterly results. We don't do that. We have strict guidelines, not just with ourselves, but we have the medical legal review team. We have the providers that tell us how much content is too much content in advertising versus custom content. And so we have a lot of guardrails, so we can't just be flooding it. So I think inherently the point of care industry has those guardrails compared to other digital properties.
Right, and we'll talk a little about this idea of trust in media. Obviously, Facebook has been in the news a lot, there's a lot of mistrust by many groups. But do you think you're held to a new standard, almost an unfair standard because of the scandal? You see, we'll talk a little about digital media and traditional web, but that obviously you're held, again, under this idea of transparency and to rebuild trust. So do you feel it's unfair? Do you feel you're leading the way on what transparency needs to look like?
So are we being held to an unfair standard? Absolutely. And given everything that went down, you can't argue that it's okay to do that. And I've taken the view, and the company as a whole, the leadership team and everyone, that it's a good thing, not just for outcome health, but for the whole industry. Transparency, there's nothing like it. And what we are doing in terms of like measurement and metrics and things, I think it's unparalleled, not just in our industry, but just in the digital industry altogether. So I can give you some examples. We partner with BPA. And they have
And BPA
direct...
is an auditing...
Yes, yeah, it's an auditing company. I think it's Business Publications Audit. That's what they're called. They've been around for decades, and they partner with a lot of industry companies. So we partner with them, and they have access, direct access to our data lake. That's unheard of. So they can spot check, sample, and view the data and report independently to our customers and clients, similar to what we are doing with our own data lake. So this last year has been a year of rebuilding, creating infrastructure, ensuring that we have all of the guardrails, data infrastructure to actually report and, you know, ensure that our, not just our paying clients, but also to our providers we don't monetize on that front, but the data is just as important to them because ultimately they are, you know, they're in the same mission as we are to get patients healthier and better. So, so I think it sort of works itself out, if you will, right. You know, from.
You know, one thing, you know, there was a New York Magazine article, we talked about it briefly yesterday, that came out in December, and it's interesting. The title was, "How Much of the Internet is Fake? Turns Out a Lot of It." And it states that less than 60% of the web traffic is human. It's a lot of bot traffic, fake clicks, automated mouse movement. You know, again, so it's not a struggle that just, you know, point of care and digital out of home is dealing with, it's web as well. How does your experience from being both in the, you know, at Twitter and this, in, you know, more of the traditional media as well as outcome health, start to address some of these bigger problems?
So yes, and I will tell you, as having been part of Twitter, bots are a thing. It's like whack-a-mole. You beat them and they pop up somewhere else with new skills, and it's an ongoing battle. And I will say technology has gotten much better, like AI and machine learning and things learn the behavior patterns and you can identify them easier. But thankfully, like at Twitter, we had a lot of that problem, but at point of care, that's not a thing. Like, we don't have to deal with that, the fake news and others. And I would actually argue what we're doing with curating content, with partnerships, that's like the verified checkbox on Twitter, where what we bring you can trust because they're from like AMA and other like well-known agencies is where we get our content from. So, and we also partner with Nielsen that gives us like traffic data of who are the cohorts in our offices, in our doctors' offices, the age group, the, you know, different descriptions and such. So we have third-party validation of who's viewing the content and how it's being utilized, et cetera. So I think the fake news and bots and stuff, I'm not saying the point-of-care industry as it evolves into moment of care and others might not have that, but today it's less of a concern at the point of care in as much as fake news and bots and other things. And I would actually argue from an advertising perspective, TV ratings are down, you have fake news, you have bots, you don't know who you're targeting. I say this as an ex-Twitter employee as well, but at the point of care, relevancy and the fact that you actually know that humans are indeed in those offices, the targeting is much better, you're actually focused. So it's a smaller number of people, net, eyeballs and things. However, it's so much more valuable because think about yourself, right? I have allergies. So when I sit in the doctor's office with my allergies, I'm so much more likely to be influenced by what I'm seeing than when I was at the bar the other night, like 2 nights ago, and I was telling Josh this. They have these ads from pharma. I don't know how many millions they're spending, but everybody was drinking scotches and smoking cigars, and mortality and wellness is so far from the top of your mind. Like, it's not even a thing. Versus when I'm sitting cold and near naked in my exam room waiting for test results, it's powerful. And we owe it. I'm not just saying from a monetization standpoint, but you owe it to the people sitting there scared and alone and their loved ones waiting at home. And you have the ability to influence all of those behavior patterns and help them get better. So it's something it gives me goosebumps when I talk about it. I really feel passionate that I want everybody to come back and partner. Like, no matter what went down or did not, as the case may be, but I feel like we're such a different company now. We have new board members, we have new leadership in place, and what we're doing in terms of, you know, data integrity, technology infrastructure, and scaling and stuff, it's unparalleled. Like, I want people to come and walk with us on this journey.
Right. So when you talk about that data integrity, we've talked a lot about compliance around the ads playing and all of that. You know, outcome is in the name of your company. So let's talk about sort of measurement and the outcome-based, you know, side of things. You know, how do you look at, you know, if you're an advertiser or any of these, you know, content that's playing, how do you measure the outcomes? How do you measure, what are the metrics you're using to show that this messaging not only is at the right time and the right context, but actually is moving the needle for healthier outcomes and for the advertisers moving the needle for if it's scripts or however you measure it?
Yeah. So from a pharma perspective and you know, advertising, we do use script lift, and we partner with industry leaders like IQVIA and Symphony, CrossX, several of these agencies that are well versed in measurement from a digital health standpoint. And we use the traditional ANCOVA model with test and control groups. So we take doctors that run our properties and content and doctors that do not, and you know, could do the comparison. This is industry standard, and that's how we figure out whether our programs are working or not. And so we measure before we start running those ad properties and while the duration of the measurement, and then we report on it. So we have strict guidelines on how we do reporting, and it's not just us, we have third parties validating the reporting and the measurement, et cetera, as well. In addition, though, one aspect of it is on the pharma side and monetization. The other angle of it is also we look at impressions, we look at how many people are actually benefiting on the provider side as well, on the network side. So we partner with big enterprise health systems to figure out, it's like the Apple Genius Bar, right? Like what's working, and if you like this, maybe you'll like something else. And I wouldn't say we're well on our way on that journey, but we certainly have the infrastructure in this last year to get us there. And this is where I don't believe we can do it alone. We need partners to help us. So we go and we talk to a lot of our clients. We do under the hood presentations of things we are doing. And I would encourage everyone to join with us in that journey of how do we make things better? Like how do we curate and say, this works better in Sausalito in these oncology centers versus the same things may not in other places. And our back-end platform has the ability to target at individual clinic levels and office levels. So.
And the messaging, the marketing, the advertising is not just, around pharmaceuticals. We talked about there is a PSA type element to screenings, and you mentioned suicide prevention. Why is suicide prevention, how did you guys come to that where you needed to be running suicide prevention messaging? What was the market? How did you develop that idea?
Yeah, so it's not so much about we needed to run it, but I think there's a responsibility. Our platform can do real-time content distribution. So when the Anthony Bourdain event happened, and then there was Kate Spade, and we had this slew of those, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, we ran, within 24 hours, we have a studio in-house, so we can actually help create the content as well. And so we created the information and we deployed it across our network. It's a powerful message. We also work pro bono with Unity and Shadowproof and others, on teenage pregnancy in the Hispanic communities. We do a lot of these sort of partnerships that I think it's not just about pharmaceutical companies, it's not just about our own content, it's also about content that's real time and valid, like flu season. We have reports during flu season that we do, so we're happy to partner with people outside of the monetization and that aspect of it.
Great. So a lot of the, what I've seen from the Digital Health Summit are tech companies and payers and providers trying to keep, some people call them consumers, or keeping them, or patients out of the offices, right? Out of the doctor's offices. As we're treating in the home, is that a threat or a new opportunity for you guys to message with consumers?
I would absolutely say it's an opportunity. So let's start with the point of care space, right? The point of care space, the physical point of care space is definitely finite. There's a lot of consolidation, there's enterprise consolidations happening. And if you take the number of rheumatologists in this country, there's only a few thousand of them. There's only a limited set of cardiologists, rheumatologists, et cetera. So unlike a lot of digital properties where you have, you can just throw more content and get more eyeballs and repeat customers, it's not like that for us. At the core of it is our provider, which is a finite number of people. And today we are in the point of care space where people come into the doctor's office. And to your point, with telemedicine and other ways to reach clients outside of the doctor's office, we have to evolve along with other ancillary partners into moment of care. So you can have possibly outcome on the go, mobile apps, and how do you be there for the customers just in time when they need it rather than only at the point of care. So I actually see that as complementary, because the reality is you're never going to be able to do away with actually needing to physically be there as well with the doctor to, for various reasons, depending on the type of therapeutic area. So
right. So finally now, you're a year plus in. What has been the biggest surprise joining sort of the healthcare ecosystem that you didn't expect coming from Silicon Valley?
Well, I'm actually amazed at how much the pharmaceutical industry and just digital health and technology. Sitting in Silicon Valley, I did not understand the advances that are already happening. I will say it was maybe me being naive, but it's been eye-opening for me to see how rapidly people are both thirsting for it. Like a lot of these companies have teams within not just the agencies, but also pharma that do analytics, that are eager to do a lot of the stuff we are also doing. So it's been eye-opening for me, and also I think they're very welcoming of people helping them achieve what we're all here to do, which is to make all of us as patients better. So.
Great, but we're still behind, as you talked about clipboards, there's still a lot of room for improvement, as we apply digital into.
Totally, yes. But I feel like there's definitely welcome arms. There are a lot of people, we were talking about it at a recent event I was at, there are a lot of people from Silicon Valley going into pharma now. And also similarly, a lot of Silicon Valley companies or other tech companies have a lot of pharmaceutical folks joining them. And hopefully there'll be a nice blend and infusion on both sides that help the community overall, I think. But it's early days though, it's nascent and lots of work to be done.
Great, well, give a round of applause for Nandini, and thank you again for joining us.